A big hello and good morning to everybody. How you doing? This is Jeremiah, and this is going to be a fantastic webinar, a very rousing discussion, actually very heavy on discussion, actually. We very much want your input on these things, and so do feel free to type in quite a bit into that Q&A box, because we have structured this to very much be almost more of a round table than just a lecture on standards. We're certainly not just going to be saying things. We do want your input on a lot of these. This webinar essentially has grown out of something that happens here on literally a daily basis. We serve some 1,500 offices, I believe, somewhere right in there, and so the 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 standards that we have seen and we have been asked about, very much asked about, having land effects conforming with those standards. Not just dozens of times, not just hundreds of times. Over 1,000 times. There's basically nothing we haven't seen, nothing we haven't heard at this point, and we'd like to think that we have some uh, observations on just this topic of CAD standards. And so very much want to hear your thoughts and the things you're struggling with. What do you think makes up a CAD standard? And your thoughts on basically everything we're going to say here. So really want your comments on this, and we've allocated quite a bit of time here to address things you might chime in with. Not so much just showing land effects commands. We're not so much showing how to save a font into land effects, but more the discussion of how to decide whether or not to change a font. And once making that decision, what would be the procedure to do that in general, more of as a CAD standard, not so much as a land effects function. We will be showing you things, but again, if anything is confusing, or you're wondering how to do things specifically, go ahead and type that question in, and we will get to that. So all that being said, I hope I queued that up appropriately, and Jake is going to start us going on this talk about CAD standards.
Great. Thank you very much, Jeremiah. Now, I will preface as well that we in no way intend to step on people's toes. So conversation is definitely welcome, and we are absolutely just giving some base guidelines as far as how you might be able to improve those standards. If you do have a great set of standards, we're not saying you need to change them, but just to really deeply go into how you actually look into those standards and how they're actually functioning for you. So we're going to really be talking about three main things. We're going to just have a nice little discussion on standards in general. Couple little key things to keep in mind, what a standard actually is, why is that your standard, and is there anything that could be improved upon. So also, what if you were stuck with a bad standard? What do you do in those cases? Setting your office standards as we actually get into having that conversation within the firm, what you guys think about when having those discussions. We're going to talk about a few key things there, as well as, are those standards that you set, are they, saving you money? Are they costing you money? Is there something you can do that will be better efficient in the way that you do things? So we're going to show, a couple tools how that might be able to save you time, and then how you actually translate those standards that you have set to another standard. You are always working between different firms or different contractors or for a municipality. Being able to understand what is required when that happens, and what tools do we have that we can actually make that process a little bit easier. Some of the biggest things that come across, my desk is a lot of things that they have to do it this way because the city requires it, or this is the way that the engineer has to have these plans. Um, Not being so tied down to working in their standard, but how we make that conversion so that when you do have to get that output to them, it's as easy as possible. So obviously not at the end, but all throughout. Please ask your questions and responses and comments. It'll be greatly appreciated. So just in general, we ask, what are your standards? And we get responses like whatever we want for that project, which if you're looking at some of these answers or these responses and you are shaking your head yes or nodding and approving of that's what's happening, that might be a red flag that you should start to take a deeper look at. Um, Not just that we're given it to use, but really why. So why is that your standard? Ask why. If I get a I'm not sure, it's just how that we've done it, you know, let's ask why. We got to find the root cause of what that standard is, because first of all, if it's not something that's easy and people are not really conforming to, they're more resistant to actually have that change or be able to be flexible in what they're doing. So, if you cannot be flexible or back up the reason when somebody asks why, it's probably not a good standard. A perfect example would be layers. Layers is probably the bane of everybody's existence. And this example of, this firm needs their palms to be on their own layer. Why do they need to be on their own layer? If they come back and say not sure, that's probably not going to fly. That's not a great standard. If you do not know why they do that, it's not good. Um, if they come back and they have it documented that it's because we need to count them, well, then that's great. We know now what that purpose of that standard was. And now we can see if there's a better way of doing things. LandFX obviously offers quite a few tools to be able to do this without needing to be on their own layer. So we are less concerned at those layers at that point. So at the end of the day, we really need to be flexible to adapt to most situations and work with any firm out there. Autodesk, they give a very basic and brief description of what a standard is. It defines a set of common properties for objects, and they list just a little handful of something to think about: layers, text styles, line types, and dimension styles. So that is just the very bare minimum of what you need to work in the file, attach it, and print it. So they do say in there, though, to enforce consistency so that it actually makes it easier for others to interpret that drawing. So that's completely along the right lines of we need to make sure that it can be enforced. But it also needs to be easy for everybody to interpret. So how do we actually accomplish that? And we're going to go into a little bit deeper as far as making maybe what actually makes a good standard. So the goals, obviously, we need to be able to have this plan easy to read. It needs to be efficient in how we do things so that we can actually move through projects so they're not, lingering. Revision time is a big killer for people, especially when it comes back to sticking with their standards. Is that standard hurting the way that you're doing a process? So that when a revision needs to be done, it's harder than it was to even do from the beginning. So we need to make sure that we think about some of these things. A short learning curve. It's a great point. If people come into the office and cannot pick up sort of right from where they start and just start running, it's going to be harder for that standard to be enforced. It's going to take time. So is that easy to learn, and is it easy to pick up? And then adaptability, obviously, if something needs to be done in a specific fashion for a specific firm, can you do that with less of a hassle? So the mission statement of a firm, obviously people have something that they are trying to achieve with that statement. If anything is ever in question about what they're doing, you can always fall back on that mission statement to get back in line with what you're doing. Think of that same principle with your standards. If that standard had a mission statement, what would it be? You got to make sure that if you go through and you start finding things, that it does not compromise those goals that you're trying to achieve before as you make that standard. So my dad is stronger than your dad. That was Jared's analogy. I love that because it's always sort of a battle back and forth between firms saying they've got a dumb standard or their standard isn't exactly right. It's not a big deal to actually have a different standard per firm. It's what makes you guys unique, but it does have to have some very core things. It has to exist. You cannot have a standard if it doesn't exist. It sounds dumb, but it is absolutely true. It has to be able to be enforced. To be able to set something up that's standardized that you can keep structured for a long period of time needs to be able to do that. And then it obviously needs to be adaptable. It needs to be able to handle any situation that comes at it, or most situations that come at it. A prime example of this would be you have a firm that has a set of standards and they just will not budge on anything. This is the way it's done. It has to be this way, and there's no changing it. There's no discussion. And then either something happens with the firm, or there's a merger, or they decide to sell. Magically, those standards change. They conform to a different standard. They can adjust, and they will adjust. So not to be so set in a specific way that you do things, but make that so that when something like this happens, you can adapt easily. Jer, I'm going to stop here. Is there any anger coming out yet?
No, nobody has chimed in yet. But so if this does ring a chord with anyone, if anyone has, I mean, even a anecdotal story from your own firm. I mean, I'm looking through the list of attendees here, and I know we've had some of these exact same discussions with a lot of these people. So I absolutely know we're striking a welcome chord with people, and so do please take a minute to chime in and share some of your stories in the question box, and we'd like to kind of incorporate you guys into this discussion. But other than that, keep on rolling.
All right, cool. So we're going to get into now setting your standards. Some might say that having that discussion with your firm is a painful process, and it's an uncomfortable process, and there's a lot of bickering and arguing about really what that should be and how things should be done. Being able to have a checklist of things that you should think about when you're setting and making those standards, you've got to have some type of process that you can go through that's easily documented, and so that you can start to follow this linear pattern of events. So what we've done here, and by the way, there are links down in by the Q&A box. If you guys click on any of those, they are in line with how I'm going through the slides. So I'm going to just sort of go back over here and defining your standards. We at Land Effects have provided a lot of helpful recommendations as you're setting up your standards. So some of the very key points that we go through here is picking a font, setting that font, and getting that layer standard as far as it goes with labels and stuff like that. So you can go through this and we go through right where you need to change those text styles, where you choose the fonts, um, what kind of sizes you're going to get for each of these standard layers here. So that was weird. If we come down here and we start to look at our default callouts, we actually just did an update to our plant labels, and I think a lot of people should be pleased with this adjustment, but we've actually got a refined list of plant labels. We've heard people wanting to change their labels, so we've tried to make it as easy as possible to be able to set that standard and that label that you want. So you'll see that we have somewhat of a different setup here now, and you have all these different versions, and we actually have the ability to include multiple fields, up to 2 fields within one attribute, so that you can quickly and easily just go in and adjust this and swap any one of these to the other side and start to adjust really how you want those labels to look. So really ask yourself, if that call out meets your standards, then choose it and use it. If it doesn't quite meet it and you need to change a couple of things, we have all of these different links that point you right to where you need to go to change those. So defining your standard. Now, saving your standards into land effects. This is probably one of the cooler pages that we have, and a big props to Crystal for creating this, and Jason for documenting it the way that he did. But saving your standards into land effects. We are a one-stop shop to putting all of your CAD standards in one easy place. Once you get this set up, you have this on the fly way that you can access any one of those standards, and it's super organized. So we go through saving your general office standards, where your fonts go, what your layer colors are, even setting up keyboard commands to all of your custom plot styles, how you save your site, your planting and your irrigation standards from hatches to symbols to schedules, and then obviously down into your details. So everything that we think that should be thought of and talked about, we have listed out in this really nice checklist kind of way that lets you really dive into really setting up that standard the way that you want. So it's maybe hard to believe, but even we are continually reassessing our standards and making sure that we have a fresh look at how we're set up. And I think we have to do that more than most, arguably, that we've got to be extremely flexible in our standards because they actually have to adapt to everybody else's. So being able to provide a system that can be adaptable to a huge range of different standards is probably the ultimate standard to have. So, what are some of the things that we're going to talk about now in regards to setting those is we're going to get into layers and the colors, texts and dim styles, the blocks, talk about callouts a little bit, and then CTV files and sheet setup. So there's always sort of a blanket statement here. There's probably the old way versus the current way versus the land effects way. Now, there might not be that big of a difference between those three, depending on the firm you're in and how you've actually been set up. But we can definitely tell everybody out there that there was an old way, and it goes back to ink on Mylar or just starting out with CAD. And the current way could be still that way, or it could be using the basics of what you learned with CAD and just figuring out how that actually adapted to when you used ink on Mylar. So, and then obviously the land effects way, being able to jump and fast forward clear to all the different features that AutoCAD offers and putting those in a quick and easy functionality and tool. So we do offer not only for the layers side of things, but the great ability to adjust and customize to whatever standards that you're trying to match. And we offer that in a couple different ways. So um, I will pause right here before we really dive in, Jer. Anything as of yet?
Really good questions. Patrick just wanted to confirm, where's that checklist located? And to those, that checklist, that's the Save Your Standards into Land Effects link. So you can just click on that in the little web links box there, and to the right of in between the question and the chat box, Save Your Standards into Land Effects, and click Browse to. That'll pop up that checklist. Um, and Steve had a really good comment, and I maybe will kind of even sort of save this comment for later, but this is exactly what I was really wanting to draw out from everybody. But he just had a comment of that basically he said, well, he says here that, in his firm, the LA is the low man on the totem pole, and that they've had the discussion with the firm over and over again, and they're basically kind of dictated down to, and he said particularly in terms of layer names and layer colors, um, that basically he's kind of vetoed, no matter how brilliant of an idea he can suggest up, he's just immediately vetoed and spoken down to. And I know in personal conversations with him, I think at a point you sort of give up, I suppose, that sort of fight, because it is a fight and it's not necessarily a fun fight. But he just asked, any more thoughts on, advice on, how to basically have that fight with, for instance, a multidiscipline firm where you have a head CAD manager in a totally different city who is just simply saying, here's your standard, take it or leave it. And in their case, they don't like some of the layer colors of the layer names. That does make their job less efficient, not following these things that we recommended for a CAD standard. So that I don't, even after belaboring it that much, I don't want to belabor that anymore. See, that's a good little discussion. Maybe we'll kind of have a little bit of brainstorm and talk about that specifically more. How to get your voice in and still keep the energy for having that sort of a fight, if it is sort of a thing. Maybe if it's just reminding those higher ups of the tenets of a CAD standard. I don't know, but that was a great comment, and want to remind people to chime in with similar comments. So go ahead, Jake.
All right. So as we, take on that old way versus the current way and versus the land effects way, a great example for layers and line colors is setting everything to layer 0 and then moving that item to the appropriate layer. That's definitely one of those people claim it to be the industry way or the CAD standard way. It's actually not the CAD standard way. That was probably the way that it had to have been done back then. And in order to keep organized and stuff like that, that was the process. But now it's more of, probably we would call it a guideline or a preferred method, but it's not a standard. So being able to make the correct layer and setting it current, and then actually drawing and inserting things onto that current layer definitely is an improvement on having to highlight and switch things over as you draw or after you draw. There's definitely things to be error prone when that process is being done. Missing items, we've reviewed plenty of plans where they have half of their blocks or 3/4 of their blocks on the right layer, and then randomly we're trying to freeze or turn things off, and some things still aren't disappearing when they should be. So being able to avoid all of those different things, we provide a way to actually accomplish the same goals, and that is making sure that it does go on the appropriate layer, but right from the beginning, so you actually don't have to think about it. Regardless of what's active and regardless of where you're at, being able to place something and know that it goes on the appropriate layer definitely gives you that peace of mind. We do have great tools as far as being able to set up whatever layers you would like in your drawing. Um, and this will sort of tie into a little bit later, but even our template setup and stuff like that, where you might need to rethink the way that you're actually setting things up, since there are all of these different great tools. Layer states is probably one of my favorite on-the-fly tools, just as a needing to build back up something if you've had to, wipe out a file if it's been, uh, corrupt or damaged or something like that. Being able to just drop in a set of layers exactly how you guys at your firm have deemed necessary is a super quick way. You don't need to have it in a template anymore. You can have these different sort of plug and play little blocks that you can be super flexible with, and you're not tied down to a specific template anymore, but you can have more of a general template and be able to just apply different layer states as needed based on what you're working on. Another great tool is Batchman. If you haven't used Batchman for anything, just research how it works and just go play with it, because it's fun just to play with. So being able to set and convert any default standard colors to match your own, layers to match your own, we make it really, really easy. So we're going to try to show that sort of at the end a little bit. It is the nature of the beast to have to give and take with technology. So being able to maybe come to terms with some of those things and see the bigger light at the end of the tunnel is definitely something we suggest, because we know for a fact that you had to give up certain things when you went from pen and paper to AutoCAD. A great example is M-text and leaders. You had to use that, to try to get the same look that you were going for with pen and paper. But there was something to gain with that. The same is said with going from the way that is done to using some of our tools uh, where they automatically label things and automatically count things, where you might have to give up just a little bit of the look that you're going for, but at the same time, it is really, really flexible. So there are obviously restrictions that we have to even abide by that can't be edited so that you do get some of those features. So some of which, the way that label blocks are named or hatch names, the system has to be able to account and look for certain things so that we don't have to try to apply every imaginable possible scenario out there of what it would be named. But so there are some structures that have to be what they are, and that's just something that will be that give and take type of relationship. So moving on to text and dim styles. Now we're going to keep going back to that mission statement, and do you have that ability to efficiently and effectively switch between your styles? Being able to apply that font for one client versus that is completely set up to you have to use that style, versus another client that you need to do a project for in the same day, that's completely different. How can you do that, and what is that current process? If you had that process already set up, and what you wish you could change, what would that be? And actually, what are the restraints in that current process or standards? So what is holding you back from either being efficient or being able to have that flexible standard? So really figuring out what that process is and what's holding you back, or what you want to be changed, is something that should be talked about. We do offer, there's, again, the last three links are going to be font links that Jeremiah has provided. Definitely go check those out. They're free fonts, and we're not going to go into, again, how to actually install them and stuff like that, but if you were to look through those, these are some really great fonts, really, really well put together, and something that you guys should think about as you want to be different, you want to be unique about how it is that your guys' setup is done, and talk about them. Now, Jeremiah is more of the font guy than I am, but really the SHX fonts versus TrueType, we're definitely leaning towards TrueType more and more because of what it offers. You do definitely get a better spacing control, being able to have that ability to do bold and italics and the special characters for different things. A lot of those SHX fonts don't give you those, which again are limiting to what that standard can be. So just definitely something to think about. And I'll stop here. And Jared, do you have anything else to throw at the text?
Yeah, just that is something we have seen, those comments there on SHX versus TrueType from the tech support side. We've had people saying, why is the schedule not getting, why are the columns not spaced right, or why are the symbols not lining up correctly with the schedule? Why are these stacked fractions not appearing correctly? Issue. We've seen a lot on the tech support side, and it ends up being, well, that's because you have this particular SHX font that just simply cannot, either it has either an inaccurate method of calculating its width or height, or it doesn't have that special character, something like even like the copyright symbol. You might want to put the copyright symbol or the trademark symbol or something into a text or a drawing. Like you're working on a detail and you want to put the trademark symbol in some text, and your SHX font doesn't have that trademark character. And then when we've had these discussions with people over tech support, we go, oh, so just switch to a TrueType font. And then inevitably, guess what we hear? I can't do that. That's our standard. And it's those sort of conversations which have really brought up this. And so hopefully you see, just like Jake said, that you know, uh, a standard that has the ability to adapt is an even stronger standard, and that's what makes it even better. Is to even say, oh wow, hey, that's a great point. I'll bring this up in the font subcommittee of our CAD Standards subcommittee, sort of a thing. Having that process to address those sorts of issues. So anyway, I'm done babbling. Go ahead, Jake.
Cool. All right, so we're going to move on to blocks. This is probably one of my favorite points to talk about because we get asked all the time, why does land effects have so many layers in our blocks? And really the answers can go on and on, but having those layers actually give us the flexibility to show that detail as much as we want to. Being able to still be completely organized and automated, the layers are actually less of a concern for us because the hard work is done. The layers are set. Again, all can be edited to whatever your likings are, but to be able to have, for these little diagrams, to be able to have those different line weights and those different effects, being able to have that flexibility to go in and change so that does look exactly the way that you want it to be, you need to have some type of structure, some type of layers in there, and we've done that all for you. We're really telling you to take control of those layers, and don't be so reliant on the layers property manager to try to manage the way that you're turning things on and off. There are so many different tools out there that are available just right within CAD, and then not to even mention everything that Land Effects does and how it acts, but we're really not focused on where these layers or how many layers there are. Obviously we've taken great consideration on where these layers reside and how they get placed and what their names are, because they do match the CAD standard layer naming. So we do take that into consideration and we do care about that, but it's not a priority of ours to try to manage everything through the layers property manager anymore. So we kind of put that to the side and don't think about only when we need to, obviously, but where those layers are. So I am going to pull out of here really quick, and we're just going to go over a couple different tools that was in that list here. So as we do things in Land Effects and we place certain blocks, it's already designated to come on to a specific layer. So having that process of layer 0 to move to the right one, and hopefully I made all the right changes, doesn't need to be anymore. So if I select one of those, you can see that this is on my LP tree layer. Again, if we go to our planting preferences, you'll have all the plant preferences, but under general, you can see that here are all of our different layers, and we can change any one of these layers to be exactly what we want it to be called. So here's our LP tree layer. We can edit him. He can be whatever color he wants, and he can be whatever name we want it to give him, and they will always come in on that layer, and it gives us a nice little description about what's going to be put onto that layer. So whatever you name this, this is where it's going to be put. So really nice and really easy and straightforward to be able to make those adjustments to, first of all, match whatever layers you would like, but again, already set up to have that functionality. So as we get into the layer blocks, then you're going to obviously see a ton of stuff. Obviously I have an XREF in here, but you're going to see that I've got all of these different layers. So why do I have these layers? Well, these layers are actually a part of that tree block, and you can turn those on and off according to what you need, but you really don't need to, because there's functions like the lay freeze where we can actually freeze that tree layer, and it will remove all layers as well, or freeze all layers as well. So we can do that. But if you're really wondering what a layer is, you can't know what a layer is unless you actually go into the block and find out what it is, or go through the layer properties managers. But if we type xlist and we click on one of those layers, it actually tells us what it is. It's on LK tree 13 millimeters. So it's by layer. So it's a really quick tool. If we need to find anything in an XREF, we can find out what that layer is. So again, disregarding the layer property manager altogether, we actually have that ability to find out where things are at, and without even going and sifting through that list. Now, if we have that known layer that we want to look for, it's definitely easy. If we click on this guy here, LK tree 35, even the filter right here, the search for layer. Okay, we can just simply start typing like this and it shrinks our list. So we're not afraid of layers anymore at this point. There's so many different options to be able to find the layers that you're looking for and adjust where you need to in a matter of seconds. The list can be for however long you would like. Obviously we try to limit it, but just as an example. So lay freeze is a great tool. Typing lay freeze and hitting enter, anything that is on that specific layer, so all my trees I can immediately remove, and continue to go through all my shrubs. So if you have different work areas, a great example is the work areas. So if I think I have some work areas in here. And pardon me, Jer hates my little pop-out menus. Dash. Do I have any work areas in there? Oh, I do, right here. So, for example, our work areas. If we wanted to actually disregard those and count everything in one hole or work in it just as an entire drawing, we don't have to go and find that layer anymore. We can type lay off or lay freeze, and it's as easy as clicking on just one of those and it will disappear. So having those tools just really removes us from that layer properties. Being able to find specific blocks or specific things throughout the project, we have awesome tools. The highlight tool is probably one of my favorite tools as well. To be able to click on a plant and see where that is throughout the project. To see where it is through the project. That highlight right there is on its own layer. We've thought about all the different processes through and where that resides to make it easy, because now what we can do, we have different options. You can see that I highlighted and it gives me even a count right there, but I can hit S for select current, and now I've made a quick selection of all of those all of those plants. So being able to quickly go from selecting or highlighting something to selecting it, I can even add additional plants to this. I can highlight all the shrubs or all of the 5 gallons. To have that flexibility now is just a great feature. So and then with a click of a button you can just remove that highlight as well. So another one is our verify labels. So it's going to tell us whether or not we have unlabeled plants or missing plants in the project or whatever it is, and again automatically goes to the correct layer so that it's not confusing. We can turn it on and off if we need to, but it's going to now pinpoint and show where we have problems, and all we need to do to get rid of that is just click our highlight tool again and they're gone. So I haven't gone into Layer Properties Manager, but I've just altered and added and turned on and off a bunch of layers in a matter of seconds. Even if I wanted to click, on different labels, it'll show me where they're actually labeled or which ones are called out. So that functionality never existed before. So we never knew to think of doing it that way, but now that it exists, that's something that a standard should be able to adapt to. So I'm going to jump back over here now. So Batchman, we'll again show this at the very end, but still a great tool to adjust and adapt the blocks for your layer standards, and even just bringing in your blocks in general as a standard. So you definitely we have power tips about our Batchman feature and how you can quickly and easily suck up all of your blocks and put them into the program so that you have your standard blocks to use. So just another great tool. We're going to move into CTVs unless there's anything dire about blocks.
No. Mute button got stuck there. Sorry about that. Nope. Patrick has a really good question I want to address when you get a little later, though. So keep on.
All right, cool. CTVs. It's no surprise that we definitely recommend CTVs versus STVs. There's definitely an advantage to that, but some of those, what it gives you, you have that visual confirmation. There's nothing harder than getting a plan that's all in white or all white with different line weights. There's nothing harder to read than that. even if they were on their own layers, you have zero idea where all of those are or if they're on the right layer. A lot of processing that has to go on that way. So you get that visual confirmation, just like the blocks that were in the previous slide. You have that look so you know exactly what colors will print at what line weight. And you're going to have that obviously in your CAD standard binder. All of this would be going into CAD standard binder, by the way. But being able to have that visual confirmation and being able to manage a list of 20 colors that you have to be worried about versus whatever possible layer name that could be done, is that what you want to do? You want to manage all of that, or do you want to just go through a list of 20 colors, know that it's set to a specific weight, and continue on? So again, thinking back to our mission statement, it is a shorter learning curve, it is efficient, and it is adaptable. So being able to hold on to those key points, we want to make sure that we never, as much as possible, step on our mission statement. So we have our change layer color tool and again batchman. So having the ability to go through multiple files at a time instead of one file at a time definitely will save the time as well. So as far as the uh, layer colors here, let me get back over here. Um, we have these different tools. Layer colors, for example, it's right here. We have listed out all the colors, and if you go into our preferences real quick, and we come into our block colors, you're actually going to see we make it really easy to know which colors we actually have used in some fashion. Some block layer colors will be assigned to these asterisks, and that's all we use. So if you are making those adjustments and trying to set them to your standards, you really just need to be focused on how these ones are getting plotted. Are these ones being used by you guys? And how you might be able to change that from this color to another color. And Land Effects is going to convert it automatically for you. So again, that flexibility is key when you start to think about bringing in other firms' drawings, a civil file, whatever it is, to have this flexibility, because what we're going to recommend in just a little bit is to be able to work through a project in your standards, not have to work through their standards and be confused and slower in the process, but being able to have that conversion when needed. So go back here. So sheet setup. This is probably I mean, we've done a whole webinar on this solely, but what type of setup will be easily adjusted and when it's needed? So going back to our templates, being able to uh, figure out how that template's set up and really take a deep look at, is that the best way that that template should be run? Because as the picture right there describes, we need a fire exit. There's so many files that we've come across that have drawing corruption and have just these massive bloated files because of proxies and because of just different things in the drawings. And the sad part is that they have everything in that drawing and you can't recover it. So it's sort of one of those, I just lost everything and I didn't have a fire exit. So thinking about the template and just being totally open-minded about, all right, so the template really should be nothing. It should be completely blank. So take that template and tip it upside down and shake out everything. That's almost what a template should hold, because we have these different tools now to be able to bring in your layers, quickly and exactly which layers you need. We have the ability to bring in our layouts and split out our layouts into individual files, because having 20 or 30 layouts in one file might be easy to work in, but it's just as easy to have your files open across the top here. So we'll go here, sorry. We're going to come back over to CAD, and you're going to see up at the top I have all of my different tabs. Now, I can absolutely make the argument that this is just as easy to toggle through as it is toggling down below in my different tabs here. So having that now access to those files just as easy as they were in one file should be something to think about as you're setting up your sheets, because if I have my planting and my irrigation and my hardscape all in one file with my base file and something happens, I lose everything. Versus if something happens with my irrigation plan, all I need to do is fix the irrigation plan and everything else is okay. So we really try to hit it home with, you need to be able to have that flexibility with how that's set up. So again, with our dim styles is a great example of something that's set in your preference set. So do I have a client that needs architectural ticks instead of arrows? Do I have it so where they have a set font size that I need? All of those can be saved into your preference set to make it unique for each case scenario that you have. So, and being able to easily toggle between the two, and that's one of the, again, main parts that we need to stress. So, you're going to have to do some trade-offs. So what trade-offs are you willing to have to make that template more flexible? So essentially, in the entire program of Land Effects, there are really good ways to handle every one of those scenarios. We handle different things where it's the layer state tools, it's the dim and text tools, it's our detail tools, our blocks, our schedules. Everything that we have has the ability to be adjusted and stored in a way that makes it easy. All of our blocks are in one location now, so you can just simply insert something that you want. You don't need to have a file with all of your different blocks at all the different scales, because the way that our functionality works is you get to place a block and it comes in based on the scale that you need it to be. So having those schedule defaults, just things like that. So I am going to pause here because we are just about done there. Any questions?
Yeah, we did have a really good question from Patrick, and it's something that, of course, we were talking about before the webinar, is having some ability for our preferences screen to sort of list out all of the settings so that people can check them out. Perhaps even going so far as to kind of actually place, for instance, all of the fonts into a sheet to just kind of automatically create a sort of a CAD standards binder. So just wanted to let Patrick, but also everybody, know that that is definitely on our radar, and that's something that we are going to be looking at implementing. One thing is, it's very easy for us to just kick out all of the settings of the preferences as just a schedule sort of a thing, but that's really not the most ideal. So that's why we're kind of pausing to make sure it's done right. We'd kind of like it more a very quick and easy process to just simply create or even update your CAD standards binder.
I like it. And just to add to that a little bit is, the stuff that we already offer as far as making that sort of the same as the printing the details. It's another awesome feature that would be well worth putting into your binder, obviously, but to have that ability alone, if you don't know about the detail side of things, is something that's super powerful, and I've grown to love a lot. But having that flexibility is, yeah, of course, something that we want to continue going with. So and that will lead right into how we actually translate what we've set up. So we have set our standards, okay? We've determined what those goals are. We've came up with our list of things. We've gone through our lovely checklist that has been provided to us at Land Effects, and we actually have saved everything into one complete file now. So we are set up to work. We've got our print styles and our plot styles set. We're just moving and grooving on everything. So how we now translate that standard to another, just sort of one of those stick in the spokes type of a thing. So okay, what do we do? How do we work? Um, we're definitely always suggesting to work in your standard until you actually need to provide that final product to the other person. There's no reason why you need to work in their layer colors and work in their fonts and everything else if there's an easy way to switch things out. Now, when it gets into the font styles and stuff like that, it does get a little hairy. We will absolutely be honest with that, but you'll see that we do understand that, and it's on our radar, just like printing the preferences, where we want to be able to have that ability to accommodate those as well. So there's still going to be some work and some setup to do, but knowing what you actually need to provide to them is a real key point. Being able to find out, and I know everybody's thinking, well, they always change their mind. Absolutely, they do change their mind. But if you can come to the conclusion, at least for 80% conclusion, that this is something that you can use your own preference for, because they don't care what the textiles are, they don't care how it prints, they just want the design. Obviously, that's going to be the ideal situation, so you can just keep working. But is this going to be something you need to actually make a unique preference set for, to actually accommodate those textiles and their labels? We've seen Walt Disney's plans, and they work with other firms that they need to set to Disney standards, and you know they're living, they can do it, and they've converted what they need to. So being able to have that flexibility to swap out for specific label styles and specific schedule defaults and different text fonts, and the list goes on. Is that something that you're going to be doing one time? Is that going to be something that you are working multiple different projects for that specific person? So understanding what it is that you actually need to provide is going to help sway where you are able to work, whether it's in your standards or if you need to provide another. So um, definitely something to think about too is working with city municipalities and stuff like that. I would say they definitely have a set way of doing things, and usually it's a set way of doing things from a long time ago. So and they're just not changing. But don't be afraid to ask why. Why do you want it this way? And if they cannot come back to you with other than because, or just keep on that why train, and try to offer a better solution. Show them that there's something that can be done easier. Over time, it will start to sink in, and there is potential for change. We do promise that, but we're not promising that it's an overnight effect. So we are going to sort of just do this last little show, I guess. Jer, if you're cool, just showing Batchman really quick. Unless there's other questions, because it is time.
Let's just show this real quick.
All right, cool. So in Batchman and FX Admin, we've got our Batchman tool here. We have all these different options. We can add a single file. We can add a folder. We can even do folders within folders. These different options down here, we can change all of a specific thing. So if we want to change all the layer names and colors, and my example is going to be, we're going to add the blocks of trees because they are not the layer names that we want. So I'm just going to select that entire folder here, and I'm going to change the layer names and colors. So obviously saving our changes as well. I'm going to hit OK, and what it's going to do is LandFX is actually going to open up really quickly to see what layers reside in each of these files. So again, taking the work out of trying to figure out, did you get all the layers, what are their names and stuff like that. We just automatically came up with that one of each of those layers that were in any of those files.
Jake, I'm not sure. Your audio cut out on me. I'm not sure if you got yourself muted accidentally or what happened there.
Can you hear me?
Ah, now I can hear you.
Oh shoot!
Yeah,
I
just
did not know what happened. Where did I leave off?
just
You
when
just
you
on
were
mute.
editing everything after you edited that layer was muted. So
All right, that was interesting. So essentially, we are able to take this layer name and take it to whatever we want to, and we can also assign it the color that we want. So being able to be this flexible across everything, and I won't do that, but we'll just say OK. And now it's actually going to go through and it's going to convert all of those colors and all of those names through those files automatically. So I had a list of 10 plants or 15 plants or something like that. It was in a matter of seconds to be able to choose the name that I want and choose the layer that I want. So as we're talking about needing to stick with the civils naming convention or something like that, all we need to do is we need to open up their file, look at their names and look at their colors that they have, do a quick audit, and have a list of what your names are and what your colors are, apply them to it, and now you're working in your standard. When you need to give it back to them, you just need to run Batchman again and put their name back in there, and you have just taken your standard and put it into theirs, and they're not going to know. But you were able to work more efficiently because you knew where things were and what colors things were. It's that simple. So I'm going to leave it at that. But Jer, if you have any last questions.
yeah, I did in a couple of back and forths here with Steve and some of the other people. Again, that general subject area of being, shall we say, stuck in a multidiscipline firm, or but it doesn't have to be multidiscipline, but that tends to be the prevailing theme that we tend to hear. of being kind of, so to speak, forced to use standards that you don't like, feeling like you don't have any ability to change standards. And the thing I would like to arm people with and remind them of is in this webinar, I'd like you to feel that we've armed you a bit for that sort of fight. That yes, effectively you will kind of be doing someone else's job for them. Yes, there's an aspect you will be stepping on someone's toes, but to be able to basically present your suggestions for changing your CAD standard, using these sorts of terminology, saying, so don't just say, here's what we think the layer names should be changed to, but to use some of that terminology of, this is why it'll be more efficient. This is why it'll be easier for new hires to learn. This is why it's going to be easier to visually cross-check a plan. That's going to correlate with us being able to work faster, more efficiently. We've even gone ahead and marked up the addendum to the CAD standards binder, sort of a thing. So yes, you are effectively kind of doing the CAD manager's job that they should have done in the first place. But you know what? It that's just nature of the beast. That is not anything new to the field of landscape architecture. That you know how it is. Nobody understands the landscape architects, and so it's going to be a little bit of having to do their job, step on their toes a little bit, but do it obviously in a nice way, in a professional way, and just affect a CAD standards that you're really going to be happy with. That's going to help you out, and I just hope that this webinar kind of helped to do that. But other than that, we didn't reach any of your tail end questions there. Feel free to shoot us an email. And of course, this will be posted on the website if you want to watch it again and again. And other than that, do have a great weekend.